Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have a special guest. I have Anissa Hudak. Anissa is a certified yoga therapist, founder of the Trauma Healing Yoga Therapy Program, and host of the Yoga for PTSD podcast. She guides people on how to utilize yoga therapy and other holistic techniques for managing and healing symptoms related to post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD. She specializes in working with people suffering from PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, and all trauma-related issues. Welcome, Anissa. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you and I, we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, how to regulate the nervous system with yoga therapy. And so I was just looking up some of the statistics around post-traumatic stress disorder, and it looks like roughly 12 million adults suffer with PTSD, most prevalently between the ages of 45 and 49, which would be right in my category, and larger percentages of women in that category as well. And of course, roughly about 11 to 23% of veterans suffer with that. So Anissa, your life has been intertwined with PTSD, trauma, and the military. You're the daughter of a Vietnam veteran, and you were also married to an active duty member for more than 20 years. And you also volunteered at the Warrior Transition Battalion in Kansas. So you're no stranger to PTSD. So I want to start off with, what is post-traumatic stress disorder and how do people get it?
Well, that's a big question.
It's a loaded question.
It really is. There's a lot of layers to that onion. So I would have to first say that the statistics sound great.
Mm-hmm.
However, the reality is everyone who is living this human experience that we're living has some sort of a touch of PTSD. We can't not.
Mm-hmm.
And what causes it? It's so different we're all individuals. And what caused mine may not necessarily cause yours.
Mm-hmm.
We could be riding in the same car together and have a car accident. And you could walk away okay, and I could walk away with PTSD from it. Mm-hmm. How is that possible? How do our soldiers, some of them go and come back from a mission, and some of them do, and some of them don't? Why is that? Well, we know that there's a lot of things that really make up a person's PTSD. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that is, how did they grow up? Were they already in a stressful environment growing up, or were they not? What was their stress level before they experienced whatever it was that they experienced? I mean, right in that moment, moments before, were you and I having an argument in the car? Or were we having a great time? Mm-hmm. Was a soldier's stress level high before he even went out on a mission? And then, of course, it is, are you afraid of clowns? Do clowns cause your PTSD?
Anything, right?
it's anything. And there's so many things that make up what happens in that moment. But it's also what happens after. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know this. I think this is a sin. By the time you're in 7th grade, let's say, that if you break an arm, what's going to happen? You're going to go to the hospital. You're going to get an x-ray. You might have to have surgery. You're probably going to get a cast. And in 6 weeks, your bone is going to be healed and you're going to be back to normal, right? However, people don't know what happens when their central nervous system goes offline. We're never taught how to reset it. And yet we all have one. So, the way I like to describe it is, have you ever seen two dogs fighting? Mm-hmm. And what happens after they're done fighting and they're walking away from one another? What do you remember seeing what they do?
I don't even know. I'm curious to see where you're going with this, because I use the dogs fighting analogy a lot as well.
Okay. They shake.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Trauma. Mm-hmm.
They shake. And that is how they reset their central nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we'll go back to you and I in the car. Afterwards, what do most people do after a car accident? They shake. Now, sometimes you get strapped down to a board. Sometimes, you get into the ER and the first thing the doctor wants to do is give you a sedative to stop the shaking.
Mm-hmm.
Even people, who are standing by the car accident. Here, let me hold you. Let me give you, because we as humans, we don't want to see each other shake.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable to see someone shake, of course. And so that shaking mechanism, though, we need that to reset our central nervous systems. I hate to break anybody's bubble here, but we're animals. We're just like the dogs. We have to shake.
We do. And a lot of us don't do that. We don't process those emotions properly to move that energy through our body. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so what happens to it? Our central nervous system goes offline, essentially. The brain is no longer talking to the body. And where we are, as far as the brain is concerned, the portion that handles emotional regulation, logistics, all of the upper echelon thinking is held in one portion. And then we have, the reptilian brain, which handles, blinking, breathing, what have you. It also handles the fight, fawn, and freeze mode. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're stuck there, we can't process emotions. We can't do math problems very well because that's in a different part of our brain that we can't access. Mm-hmm. By doing that shaking mechanism, we're able to, again, reset the central nervous system, make sure that the brain and the body are talking to one another again, and we have access to that upper echelon brain.
Yeah, and that's powerful. I don't talk about this too much on my show, but I've been a guest on several podcasts recently, and it's come up. I worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years, and I worked in the trauma units. And so I was constantly seeing gunshot wounds, car accidents, trauma, like a first responder would. And after I left that job, about 6 months after that, I locked in my body. Literally, I was in such a state of fight, flight, or freeze response, PTSD, that I was not expecting was going to happen. And what I began to notice, I was almost 90% paralyzed from the legs down. I had to crawl to the bathroom for 4 months. I could not move that energy out of my body because I had basically just shoved every single emotion, dealing with grieving families, dealing with trauma, dealing with loss in my body. And so I would notice, first thing I would do, first thing in the morning, the moment my eyes would open, my body would stiffen and then I'd start to shake. And so my body knew what to do, but it hurt when it did that. It was like, but I know now my body was regulating, my central nervous system was regulating, but it was automatically doing, like the dogs, like you said, the shaking. And so I just let it move itself out. And when I began to recognize, emotions began to bubble to the surface as well. So it wasn't just my body creating a movement. I was moving those emotions to the surface too. And finally, after a certain extended amount of time, I was able to release the valve on that Instapot and let those emotions come out.
It's scary stuff, especially when you don't realize what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies, literally, they store trauma on a molecular level in your body. You have to process it. And there will come a time, you can shove as much as you want into that 5-pound bag of potatoes. At some point, your body is going to say, enough. Mm-hmm. And it's going to scream. So you have a choice. You can either deal with it as it's ongoing, or you can deal with it when the body starts screaming.
Absolutely. And I was dealing with it to a certain extent, but I had no idea, like literally pulling myself out of that job. It was like every single thing you've trapped in your body is coming out. And I am an EFT practitioner. So I was just lay in bed and just tap and muscle test and move and try to stretch. At that time, it was in my sacrum, and it was really difficult because I was practicing yoga, and we're going to talk about the difference between yoga and yoga therapy because I'm excited to learn more about that. But I began to recognize I had stuffed all these emotions down. And what I began to see specifically with PTSD was some of those trapped emotions were holding on to the past or having a hard time moving forward. At least that was my experience. I felt very stuck. I was feeling feelings of regret. I had moved across the country. I'd quit my job. I had all of these major changes taking place. And so my body was just locked up. And so I can understand these first responders, these, our veterans, people who are constantly seeing things, and then their subconscious is just making a little file in there. And if you're not processing that, then that file is going to open up at some time, and then the body is going to respond. And so you're working with the body and you're working with movement. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, Anissa. What is, you had suffered with PTSD yourself. You had seen others suffering with it, which, really inspired you to open up the trauma healing yoga therapy program. And I want to hear more about that. And you talk about yoga therapy. Now, most of us are familiar with yoga, but what is the difference between yoga and yoga therapy?
Okay, so if you were to think of yoga as a big pie, split it down the middle, and on one side we have fitness-based yoga. We have Ashtanga and Bikram and co-ed naked yoga and aerial yoga and what have you, right? All kinds of really fun, great for your body, fitness-based yoga. Fabulous. May you have an emotional release during one of these sessions? Absolutely, it can happen. However, they're not geared for that. They're geared for really getting into your body and a workout. On the other side, we have yoga therapy. And what yoga therapists do is we kind of pinpoint a niche that we want to work with, a group of people who are trying to really come to a goal. So we have, yoga for cardiac rehab and yoga therapy for cancer, CP, Parkinson's, you name it. I mean, we have a yoga therapy, arthritis, even seniors. We kind of characterize seniors as more yoga therapy, helping with balance and what have you. I happen to work with people who struggle with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. PTSD really is a form of a traumatic brain injury because you're stuck in one portion of your brain. So, and the central nervous system's offline. So that's what, we characterize it as. And that's really as simple and as complex as it is.
That's really neat. And I worked with traumatic brain injury patients when I was working in the trauma units. And so that I would just see people amazingly recover and some people not, so it's really neat that you have a therapy that can help people through that. I had a doctor who had suffered a traumatic brain injury, and we were on the unit one day, and the units are loud. You've got buzzers and people yelling, and, there's a lot of activity going on. Well, it had triggered something in his brain when that buzzer went off, and he ripped a phone off the wall and threw it, down the hallway. And then after that, he realized what he had done. And he said, I had no control over that. I don't really know what just happened. It was like this alarm went off inside of him and it triggered a response. And I can definitely say that because there's certain ringtones that I had a hard time getting over after I left that job that would trigger that fight, flight, or freeze response within me. And I've actually worked with a few homicide detectives here locally that said the same thing, that their pager would go off and they'd immediately take them back to a moment. And so what are some of the common signs or symptoms that you see, Anissa, working with people who may be struggling with PTSD?
Well, a lack of emotional regulation is a big one.
Yeah, like lashing out.
It's mostly anger as opposed to crying. So yeah, I mean, just unchecked anger issues. So that's probably one of the big ones. Lack of sleep,
That's a huge
lack of
one.
taking care of themselves. Going to the doctor, getting a haircut, things that we don't.
Grooming. Yeah.
Grooming, just eating well.
Mhm.
Obviously substance abuse as a
Yeah.
coping mechanism, unfortunately. And that can be anything from alcoholism to porn to gambling to shopping, eating, you name it, technology, all kinds of different things. Even not taking care of themselves financially, making really poor financial decisions. There's all kinds of things that really go into it, but I would have to say for the most part, anger
Mhm. Yeah,
and really
that's what
a
I saw.
lack of
Mhm.
lack of taking care of themselves.
Yeah, and those are tough. I think when I was going through that, I just threw my hands in the air. It was like, I just surrender to this. I don't know what else to do. And I remember making a comment to my dad that, when I was in that such deep stage of I could barely walk. I mean, I was a college athlete and here I am barely, I had to crawl to the bathroom. I was soiling myself. I couldn't get there, and I was in so much pain and I knew deep down it was emotional. I knew all those years of seeing what I was seeing and not processing it properly were finally bubbling to the surface. But I had made a comment to my dad. I know why people check out. I know why people commit suicide because the emotional pain and the physical pain was so unbearable. And for those words to come out of my mouth, my dad's like, who is this person? This is not you. And it was like, I was trapped in a body that I did not know what to do with. I didn't know how to get it to function. And so, Anissa, how do you see people managing or coping with PTSD? Maybe they aren't to the point of yoga therapy yet, or even EFT tapping for that matter. What are some things that you're seeing that, maybe either healthy or unhealthy ways that they're coping with PTSD?
Well, as I said, substance abuse,
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's a big one. And then, of course, uh, even like I said, the gambling, the porn, the sex, the eating, technology. Those are usually the coping mechanisms. Isolating themselves,
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Hmm.
they hate themselves so much. They can't understand why every time they open their mouth, everyone around them reacts the
Hmm.
way they do. Well, it's because, quite frankly, you're being an asshole
You're
and,
angry. Hmm.
you're angry, you're not being a nice person to be around. And so they wind up isolating themselves because they know that they're harming people. They know that they're upsetting people and they don't want to do that. But they also feel so misunderstood. Nobody around me gets why I'm, feeling this way. Um,
Yeah, it's almost like they're trapped in an internal jail, an internal prison. It's like you're inside screaming and you don't know how to fix it. That's how I felt. It was like I would see this at the hospitals. It was called locked in syndrome, where people, their eyes would move and they would respond, but they couldn't, their body wouldn't work. And I can only imagine what those people felt like, just that anger and frustration inside. And I felt like that to a certain extent, but I see that working with PTSD, people who are suffering with it. It's just this bubbling inside that they're trying to find a way to release it, to relieve themselves.
yes, absolutely. And it's generally not a good way
No.
at first, unfortunately, which then leads to the isolation and what have you. There is just this really negative recording that's going on in the brain that, is constantly playing to them. And it's never anything positive.
Mhm.
And they're really trapped with all of this anger and this negativity. And it just becomes incredibly toxic.
Really does. And so, Anissa, how can yoga therapy help regulate the nervous system? What is the science behind it?
Oh, we get all nerdy. I love this. Um, so what happens is that, as I said, the trauma is stored in a literally molecular level in the body. We know that there are muscle groups that actually hold more than others.
The psoas, that was mine. The darn psoas. I didn't even know what that thing was.
And here's something really interesting. Last year, I went to a cadaver lab. Have you ever been to one?
Yeah. I worked in organ donation. I saw a lot of cadavers.
Okay. And so I go in and I'm a yogi. There are certain muscles I want to see because I work with them. So I said to the gentleman who was incredibly knowledgeable, I want to see the psoas. Now I know it's a hip flexor, but I want to see if he knows. And he looks at me and he says, I'm sorry, I don't know where you're talking about.
That's a major muscle.
And I said, really, you don't know the psoas? He said, no. Can you tell me what region it's in? And I was like, oh my word. I said, can you show me the hip flexor? I can show you that. He, pops it out and shows it to me and what have you. And I'm like, okay, this is the psoas. So the psoas is the emotional warehouse of your body. Now, quite frankly, if you ask me, my humble opinion, I think that it is the most important muscle you have in your body.
I agree with you on that. 100. Now that I went through that, I agree with you 100%.
Okay. So from a physical aspect, whenever you are injured and or harmed, or you're feeling horrible, you slink down into the fetal position. It is those two muscles, the hip flexors, or as we know, the psoas, that actually does that movement. What it does is it actually protects all of the organs in the trunk. So your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, all of that. That's why it does that mechanism, to, make sure that it protects those organs, all of your vital organs. Without that, you're a sitting duck.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's also the emotional warehouse of your body. It holds all of your emotion, your happiness, your joy, your grief, your frustration, your everything. It's all there. And so if you've ever heard somebody say, gosh, my hips are really tight, I'm always thinking, yeah, what's going on in your body?
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
Going on in your
what's
life?
Going on in your emotional body? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's the psoas muscle. And what we do is we work the psoas muscle to exhaustion, utilizing certain yoga poses. And then what happens? Have you ever had a really good day at the gym and you start to tremble?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or
that's
even
what we want.
Yoga, I've done that too. Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going for. We want to get the psoas to tremble. Now, the psoas, hip flexor, is the deepest muscle in your body. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot for us to get in there.
So it's deep under the pelvic area. Like for those of you out there that don't know what the psoas is, and it's PSOAS.
Yes.
It's deep in there. It's like you take your finger right into that hip, into your pelvic area. It's deep in there. I've had a masseuse get in there and whoa. Was that powerful.
Yes. If you find a really good masseuse who can do that.
I was laughing. Everything was coming out.
Yep. Exactly. So we have to do a full body workout to really warm up the whole psoas trail. So you are going to get a full body workout. And then we go deep. We go deep into that psoas muscle and we try to get it to shake. And by doing that, we are replicating that shaking mechanism to help reset the central nervous system. Mm-hmm. We're also releasing a lot of the baggage you don't need to be carrying, which gives you more bandwidth. So when you walk out the door and you're ready to face life again, you have a little bit more bandwidth.
Uh-huh.
So it's really great for everyone. However, for those of us with PTSD, it's a godsend.
It is. Because you just want the pain to be relieved. Even just a little bit. It feels good.
Yes.
So, Anissa, for those people, out there, veterans who are like, I'm not into yoga, I'm not into this. How can you talk to, some of those folks out there that might be really suffering with PTSD, but they're like, I'm not sure about this.
Okay. So I worked with the Warrior Transition Battalion at Fort Riley, Kansas. I worked with them for over 3.5 years. And yes, the guys would come in. God bless them. I loved them. Working with them was the best because they would come in and they'd be like, yeah, we're going to stretch a little and maybe do some ballet or whatever. And then we're going to take a nap. And then, yeah, we'll be done. And I get them on the mats. And after an hour, they would come up to me, and it was like clockwork. They would all do this very quietly, come up to me and say, ma'am, I feel really good. And that wasn't what I expected it to be. I'll see you next week.
That's awesome.
Uh-huh. I'll see you next week. And then after a couple of weeks of them coming, they would bring their friends. Dude, you got to try this. This is amazing. She rocks. This is not what you think it is. You know, she's going to hit your ass. I mean, it was just hysterical. I had so many people who just became believers.
Hey, when something works, it works, right?
Exactly. I would have to say one of the best things that ever happened was I was working with a group one time, and they were all, something had happened in the unit and people that they knew and what have you. And I said, I think we really need just something really calming. Let's do a body scan meditation. So we did a little bit of work, a couple of yoga poses, and then we went ahead and we got into a rest position. And I'd started doing this body scan. And afterwards, this man came up to me and he said, I am 54 years old and I have never been introduced to my body that way.
Wow.
I've never had a tour of my body the way you did that. He said, I was introduced to parts I have never given any thought to. He said, how sad is that?
Mm.
I said, but it's good that you've done it. You did it now. That's what's important. Now you have that acknowledgement. He said, every day I have to go for a treatment that puts me in a chair for 20 minutes by myself. He said, I'm going to find, these body scans, maybe on YouTube or something, and listen and be reintroduced to my body every day.
That's fascinating. It's because, when we suffer trauma, we shoot out of the body. It's like, we don't want to be in our body. We take off, right? And so bringing yourself back into your body and feeling that awareness and drawing attention to those areas that need attention too, it can be so healing.
Yeah, that was probably one of my greatest wins.
That's so cool.
I mean, this poor man, but now he has it, and that's the beauty of it. And so, yeah, there are people who think that yoga is a bunch of fluff. And it's not. You need to find someone who really can meet your needs. And that's really important. You don't want to walk into your corner neighborhood yoga studio and expect to get a yoga therapy session.
Exactly. There's a big difference. Absolutely.
There is a huge, huge difference. If you go to a regular class and you have an emotional release, which is great, however, they may not know how to handle it.
Yeah. Especially if it's a big one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you really need to find someone who can meet your needs. And that is one of the biggest things that's so very, very important.
Mm-hmm. So for the veterans, Anissa, I know I've got a few veteran clients, and I noticed that the VAs actually do provide EFT tapping, EMDR. Do they provide yoga therapy too at the VA hospitals?
They do.
That's awesome.
Some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them. Yes.
Yeah, because I have noticed, I'm like, wow, the VAs have a lot more holistic treatments than some of our traditional facilities do that I worked in. So it's just a matter of time, I think, before I was seeing Reiki at some of them, when I was there, but it's really neat to hear from my clients who go to the VA. I'm like, really? They have that modality? That's really neat.
They're trying everything. And what's the beauty of it is that because we're so individual, what works for me may not work for you. And so they need to really, allow so many of these different modalities, because what speaks to you may not speak to me.
Very true. Mm-hmm.
And so it's vitally important. And that's something, as you're going on your healing journey, I recommend all of my clients get a book. Start writing down what you've tried, when you tried it, how you tried it, what it was, whatever. And in 6 months, 10 months, 12, 18 months, go back to it and try it again, because you're a different person now. You've had however many months of healing. And just because it didn't work back then, it could work now.
Very true. That's such great advice, because it's like you circle back. You may not resonate with it in the beginning, but then you've gone through all this healing. You become more flexible, right? You become more expansive. And now you're like, I'm going to try that again. And at that point, you may come to a different practitioner at that point too, which could be a totally different experience. You know, someone may come to you for yoga therapy and have a totally different experience than a counterpart, you know? And so it really does depend on the practitioner as well.
Absolutely. You know, they say the same man never steps in the same river twice.
Yes.
And yes, the practitioner can be that a big portion of it. And, you know, I always, when I did have a private practice studio open, you know, people would come and try me. And I'd be like, that's okay. Have you tried this person? Have you gone here? Have you done this? Da, da, da. If you don't find what you need through me, that's okay. I just want you to get your needs met.
With your help. Yeah.
That's what's important. I am not the end all, by no means. You know, people can look me up. You know, you can go to my website, but you can also go to the International Association of Yoga Therapists, IAYT. And they have a whole listing of yoga therapists, online, local, that you can find and work with.
So, Anissa, if someone wants to work with you, do they have to live in your local area? Do you provide online sessions? How does it work?
I do everything online. I am based in Manhattan, Kansas, right outside of Fort Riley. And I got to tell you, you know, the livestock outnumber the people here.
I know, I've been through Kansas before.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And the cows do not dig the yoga.
What do you mean? They have goat yoga here. They don't have cow yoga there.
The cows are not digging it. However, the bison do. Believe it or not, the bison are into it, but the cows are not. So no, I do everything online. I do one-on-ones, you know, private practice. I also do group. I'm really just ready within like this month, May, I will be releasing, it's called Phoenix Women. And it is for women only who struggle with PTSD. And it's going to be online and recorded classes, because sometimes, you know, at 3 a.m. and your mind is racing.
Yeah.
You need something.
You do, because PTSD doesn't have a time clock. Mine came out at Target when I was sniffing an aromatherapy candle. I just sat down and had an emotional release. And so it can happen at any time.
Anytime. And so there's going to be recorded classes. If you need to jump on your mat at 3 a.m., please don't call me and wake me. Just, you know, push play. But there's also going to be some an educational piece. And I think it's really important when people understand what is going on in their bodies, then they can see it. And they can say, wait a minute, I don't have to react this way. I can respond maybe this way. And that's really the key to healing. When you can get to that point and you can see what's happening, you can feel yourself getting spun up or whatever it is. You can say, wait a minute, I know what's happening. I know what this is. Okay, let me take a breath and let me move on. That, I think, is the key right there to healing. So really getting folks to understand what is going on in their body. So there's that little educational piece, bite-sized pieces every month. And then there's a community aspect, because we were never meant to heal on our own. And yet PTSD is incredibly isolating.
It is.
And we don't need to be alone. We don't need to talk about what got us there.
We don't need to stick with a story. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We're here now and we're going to move forward. And that's what's important.
Yeah, because PTSD feels stuck. That's, you know, most of the time, that's how I felt. I felt stuck. And then, you know, just having that glimpse of hope to move forward is what I kept following, that light. And then I started to heal.
Giving up is not an option. However, when you are in the muck of it, unfortunately, too many people decide to go ahead and take their own lives. And it's sad that people feel that stuck.
Yeah. And like I said, I felt that way, it was for a glimpse. It was a little bit, but I felt I could see, I could empathize with people as to why they do that,
Absolutely.
because you just don't
Absolutely.
see the light at the end of the tunnel.
There is none.
Hmm.
At that point in time, there isn't one. And that's it's just so sad.
It is. And so, Anissa, you work with a lot of women too who suffered sexual abuse. And so, tell us a little bit about the services that you provide and how people can connect with you.
Well, I am a two-time rape survivor. And what I found was that there wasn't a place for us. When you look at organized self-help groups like AA, NA, or even Weight Watchers, they all have a community. Because again, you're not supposed to heal on your own. And so when I was 18, I was date raped, and I did what everybody did. You go to talk therapy, and eventually I did get on some meds, and that was okay. But what I found was over the years, I kept going back to talk therapy, and I'm talking about the same stuff, and I wasn't getting any closure. 7 years ago, I was raped again. And I really sat down and I thought about it once I was in a place where I could. Thankfully, I had my yoga therapy. I was able to, my mat was my
You
lifeline.
had tools.
I did have tools, and it didn't take so long. And I felt like I had more closure. And I said, okay, what's different here? And what did I need when I was 18? What did I need that I have maybe now? And I realized I didn't have a community. I still don't have a community. So I needed to create one.
Because you're not the only one that has gone through something like that.
Exactly. We know that 1 out of every 2 women have experienced some sort of sexual assault or
Wow,
violence.
that's significant. Mm-hmm.
And so, thankfully I had my mat. I'm kind of like Linus with my mat. I actually had to have surgery done, and I took my mat, and my husband's like, you realize you're not getting on for like 6 weeks. Why are you bringing? I said, because it's my best friend. Even the doctor kind of took a double take when he came in the room, So
That's
I'm kind of like
my emotional support mat right there.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I'm kind of like Linus about that, but there's so many things that can happen on a mat, and it doesn't have to look like a yoga pose. I mean, there are days when I crawl on that mat and just cry.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because that's yoga, because it's releasing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yoga looks very different depending on the day and what your needs are. And it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
I love my mat because I can tell it anything and it doesn't talk. It doesn't talk back, and it doesn't tell anybody anything. It's my greatest confidant. So I'm blessed. I'm blessed. And, yoga is this incredible gift. It has given me so much. And I don't feel like I'm teaching yoga. I'm just sharing this amazing gift.
Mm-hmm. That we all have within inside of us, right? It's something that we can all do no matter what abilities you have, right?
And that's, a lot of people think that they have to look like an Instagram model.
Or a Tibetan monk or something,
Not the case. Not the case. So yeah, it's been a blessing. And that's really what I want to do, is create this place for women to go and be able to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we don't have to talk about it. We all know why we're there.
Yeah, we can release energy without having to talk about it. Mm-hmm.
There's more to healing than talking.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have to move it out of the body. And that is what my scope of practice is: moving the trauma out of your body. Absolutely. Or helping you do it.
Mm-hmm. And so, Anissa, how can people connect with you if they're feeling guided to do so?
Well, I'm all over the internet like a bad penny. I come up under traumahealingyoga.com. And there is that body scan meditation that I talked about. It is there. It's available for free.
Awesome.
So if anybody wants to listen to that, my boys, I have two boys that are almost 18 and 21. And they say that my voice would, bore a dead man to death. So if anything, I'll bore you to sleep. Um, you know, so, so that body scan is there available,
Hey, I'd rather have a soft, soothing voice than a raspy, loud voice. I tried to do a meditation last night and his voice was just, it would get soft and then it would get loud. I'm like, I can't, I'm trying to sleep. This is not my reality.
I was at a yoga conference with a friend of mine and we decided to put on a yoga nidra.
Oh yeah, I love those. Yeah.
Love them, love them. And this woman started talking. It was on YouTube and we were just listening to it and we were 5 minutes in and, we're just starting to really come down and, get into that place. And all of a sudden in like the sexiest, breathless type of voice, she says, now take a deep breath. And we cackled for like 30 minutes. Totally ruined the moment, So case in point, please listen throughout the entire thing before you actually put it on to go to bed.
It's very true. It's so true. Because when you get into that place where your nervous system is starting to settle down and you're starting to relax, you don't want someone, it sounds like they're hitting pans, you're like, oh no, like I can't.
Yes. So, here's a practitioner's tip. Listen to it fully before you actually go to utilize it.
Well, great. Well, Anissa, this has been such a fun show and I love your personality. I love your energy. Thank you. Because PTSD isn't something that's easy to talk about. It's not always something that's real fun to go through. And I can definitely speak from experience, but having been on the other side of it, yoga was a therapy that I used. It was movement, just shaking my body, doing things that I didn't really even understand at the time that I needed to do. And so I really do appreciate all that you're doing. I appreciate all the help that you're giving all the people out there, all the 12 million plus adults out there who are more who are struggling with this. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate, no, this was so much fun. Thank you. And you're right. PTSD it's heavy, but it doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be. And again, giving up is not an option. So just, for your listeners, get out there and find what works for you.
Absolutely. And check out the body scan meditation on Anissa's website.
TraumaHealingYoga.com. Thank you so much again for having me on. It was great chatting with you.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.